Jacob, I've got some good news for you.
Wait, what? All right, what's your good news, Mike?
All right. So I know that, we've done a few episodes, and actually this one's going to be a little bit about kind of a dystopian, apocalyptic sort of setting. And it's actually been a while, but we've done some, and it's been a while, but we've done some AI ones before too. So like I said, I've got good news. The CEO of Cisco signed the Rome Call for AI Ethics that was produced by the Vatican today. And that's also been signed by the CEOs of Microsoft and IBM. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Wait, you're telling me that the Vatican, Microsoft, Cisco, and IBM have all signed some kind of crazy secret document about controlling technology of the future?
Well, first of all, it's public because I know about it, so it's not safe. It's not
but
secret.
But was it drafted in secret?
I mean, I can't get into all the details. I'm not at liberty to say all of that, but I at least know that I'm covered. I don't know about the rest of yous.
Welcome to the Voyage podcast, a show that traverses the oceans of myth and legend through the lens of Catholic theology and philosophy. Come aboard as we set sail in pursuit of the heroic life and Christian virtue, with your hosts, Mike Schramm and Jacob Platty.
Is this your coming out party as an integralist? How do you say that? I always ever Catholic integralist?
Integralist?
Integralist? I don't know.
Honestly, the whole kind of political philosophy, political theology, that's never really been my area of focus or expertise. So I can't speak to that as well as some other internet bros can. But I know that's a thing. I know it's a thing that people talk about. So that's as far as I can go with it.
Maybe we'll get there one day.
Like I said, I haven't read the fine print on the Rome Call for AI Ethics, but I assume that it means the Vatican controls all of the AI that those companies produce. That's at least my hope, is that it's going to be in the right hands. It'll kind of be like the people controlling the different fallout shelters that we'll be talking about in a second. Yeah. As long as it's in the right hands, then
is this
society
the
will be fine.
birth of Vatican tech as opposed to Vault-Tec? Yeah,
one can only hope. One can only hope.
All right.
I'm sure there's a bunker. There's got to be a fallout shelter underneath St. Peter's.
Oh man,
right?
if you just keep digging has a vault
past the bones. Yeah, if you just keep going past the bones of St. Peter directly under the altar, then you'll eventually hit that fallout shelter.
They just didn't pan to it in the TV show. This is going to be full spoilers, by the way, right? Just full spoilers for the TV show.
The full season came out. Yeah, it's been out for a week, 2 weeks now. And that's enough time to watch the 8 hour long episodes.
So as long as we're
let's
spoiling,
not pretend that we didn't watch it in a weekend. A person's not going to watch it in a whole weekend anyway.
But at the end of the show, when there's that, table scene with all the different heads of corporations around to sign things, the camera just didn't pan far enough to the left where the Pope would have been sitting. The Pope would have been sitting there, and his experiment would have been like a Benedictine monastery style kind of
And instead of the blue, it'll be like the Alps, and everybody has to wear the hat and all that stuff.
The Pope is like, here's an idea. Why don't we create communities that are dedicated to Christ, that just sit around all day, keep safeguarding
and work and pray
and working and praying, and let's see how that does for humanity. Maybe that'll work.
So that's going to be that's the theme. Is the Fallout was the Benedict option? Where was Rod Dreher on that?
The Vault-Tec is all just Benedict option style things. No, and I'm not even.
Yeah, where was he on that?
I get that my delivery was a bit mixed as to whether or not I was being sarcastic or being pro Catholic or negative Catholic. But no, in theory, it's funny. This whole show is about all these Vault-Tec communities and all that, and it's these are all basically kind of little monastery / communes, Canticle for Leibowitz style. And the question at the end is, we can have all these different experiments to see what type of civilization actually benefits humanity. And it's I think we already kind of figured this one out. Actually, I think we.
Yeah, I mean. That experiment's been tried.
There's already been a dark age, and there's already been communities that survived it and led to, human flourishing on the other side of it. Someone should tell the Fallout writers about it sometime.
Yeah, somebody, I mean, if nothing else, read Canticle for Leibowitz, which is, it's been, what was that, in June we did that episode, a long time ago now? So
almost a year now.
It feels longer, but
I feel like I've been in a cryogenic, sleeping chamber for 200 years.
We've lived such lives since then.
Such lives.
Back to our younger selves. Which I haven't even, welcome everybody to this episode. If you haven't picked up yet, to the Voyage podcast, where we are going to be, just kind of, not just giving our thoughts, but sort of the, theological connections, some of the other stuff we've talked about to the new Fallout Amazon Prime TV show. Obviously that's based off of the video game. And so, Jacob, this is going to be more your area. We're going to kind of throw in whether it was like the Easter eggs that I know people talked about on the show, or maybe even just like the general scope of the game, because there are like sequel games, right? Which I think people are thinking there's going to be a season 2.
Well, the franchise, season 2, I'm pretty sure I heard it's already been greenlit. Which I think it's already been, surprise. It's been confirmed. Mega popular. And for good reason. I thought this was a really fun show. Really enjoyed it. Hey, before we go much further, this is what my original cold opening suggestion was going to be, but you screwed it up.
Fine.
So, but it's not too late.
I was just so excited because I saw the article right before.
We need to open this episode in general with war. War never changes. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about that. Welcome to the Voyage Comics podcast.
Oh, there you go. That fits right into your. I guess
that's how like all the video games. Those are iconic. Sometimes the video games literally open with war never changes, and sometimes it gets snuck in at a different part of the opening monologue. But that's like the Star Wars scroll, every Fallout game has that war never changes kind of like opening mantra kind of thing.
Which they hold that off until the final episode, I think.
They dropped that line into one of the characters. And I was watching it with my kids, and all my kids were like, "They said the line. They said the line." Yeah,
they said, there was like that meme of DiCaprio pointing at the TV.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It was pretty much that. Yeah. Which,
I mean, honestly, not having familiarity with the games, I still knew that was obviously on purpose. Like that was the. The writers were like,
and there's like a 10-second. No, honestly, they really did. They really did like ham it up in a good way. Pause. Yeah, there was a very, very pregnant pause. Yeah, there's like a 10-second pause of the camera slowly zooming in towards this lady's face, and you're just like on the edge of your seat, and all of a sudden, war never changes. So my kids, it worked like gangbusters. And honestly, I really enjoyed it too. My kids are way more into these video games than I am. I've probably played about 80 hours worth of Fallout across Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. And if you think 80 hours worth of Fallout sounds like a lot of time, I mean, that you are mistaken.
Compared to zero, it is certainly.
It certainly feels like I spent 80 hours of my life doing something, doesn't it?
My eyes in my head went wide when you said it. So
this is for anyone who is familiar with the Fallout games. What I just admitted is that I know nothing about Fallout and that I am a total Fallout noob, because anyone who's merely invested 80 hours into Fallout across 2 games has done nothing with the Fallout games. And I am, if this was Boy Scouts, I'm like what is that? Like a Tiger Scout? I'm like basic bottom of the barrel here. I have 80 hours is not. It's supposed to be like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. It's supposed to be like thousands of hours. That's how much time people spend playing these Fallout games.
I'm not going to make any sort of comment on that. We're just going to, we're just going to.
Are you don't suggest that's a waste of time, Mike. Don't you dare suggest the hundreds of hours of playing in a fictional video game world is a waste of time. Because
wouldn't
millions of people are out there doing that.
I wouldn't dream of it.
Dystopian societies, super far-fetched. This idea that societies would be dystopian.
Jacob, what's the real dystopia? This is Ready Player One scenario you just described to me, or So anyway.
It just goes to show that dystopias come in all shapes and sizes, And our modern American culture has a little bit of all of them in just different pockets. You know, the future, the dystopian future, it's all of them. They're all right. All of the dystopias are right, and they're already seeded and underway as we speak.
Well, and that actually, I mean, I guess you sort of fell into it. That does kind of lead to the first thing that I think is worth bringing up. And you could almost say this for like every property that we talk about now, but maybe especially for the dystopian ones, which is, it's like if a person didn't believe in original sin before, it's like how, it reminds me of that Chesterton line where it's like it's the only dogma of the church that you don't actually need revelation for, because all you need to do is open the newspaper. And we've had many conversations about this before where it's like, Hollywood knows that there's a problem with human nature or, with humanity. It's just they don't have the solution. And this is like a perfect example where, it's almost like they leaned into the satire, especially towards the end. And we kind of talked about the final episode where it's like, oh, you have these guys who have their solution and these guys who have their solution. And it's like, we as the viewer know that they're all ridiculous, but the characters don't see how they're ridiculous. But then it's like, well, wait a second. The writers wrote that. Like, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, it's all of these kind of, that's actually, I'm going to have to rewatch this show because here's what I'll say. I definitely enjoyed it. Like, it's a very fun show, and it's a show that's totally just right up my alley. And it is full of meaty morality questions, as a lot of apocalyptic fiction is, right? Like, what do you, it's the same type of questions that you see in like the Last of Us TV show or the
any zombie
questions.
Show, which this is still kind of a zombie show, but it's not as much about the zombies.
Or the ghouls,
the ghouls, basically.
Yeah. Which, let me remind you, a ghoul is just a medieval term for a zombie. Zombies used to just be called ghouls. So, well,
and they're much more human-like in this show. But again, we'll digress. We digress.
Well, because they're almost vampiric. Because you could kind of argue that Fallout ghouls are closer in nature to a medieval vampire. But as far as like the actual answers or even what type of questions that this particular show was bringing up and what type of commentary it was trying to make, I'm still, I'm fresh from watching it. Like, I finished it last night, right? And so, I did finish it over about like 4 days. And I do think that this show falls into that kind of modern category of like kind of poking fun at, just like all these shows, a lot of shows nowadays, there's a kind of like criticism of late stage capitalism, right? This idea that like the 1950s consumer culture birthed, this kind of decadent culture that we live in now, and we're going to call that capitalism, right? That's the word we're going to give it. And as such, capitalism is kind of bad or whatever. But these types of shows are being produced by mega capitalist corporations that produce their content on the capitalist model and are fully participate in the capitalist model. And so there's a sense of like irony
on Amazon Prime. I mean,
right. Yeah. Well, and so but the shows, they also seem to be aware of it, right? Like, this particular show actually feeds a line into its character, trying to like kind of circumvent this criticism, right? Where the lady's like, if only the bad guys use hypocrisy, then we'll never win, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of like winking
into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's kind of winking at the audience, like, yeah, it's ironic that we're making a kind of anti-capitalist show as a capitalist form of entertainment. But what else are we going to do?
But this is also like the big criticism of that sort of Marxism is it ultimately reduces to a will to power. And that's basically what what's the character's name? I can't, Moldaver is basically saying, right? Is that basically it's all about power. It's not about, we have to do the bad thing too, because the other bad people are doing it. And so this is how we win. And that's, in one sense, it's obviously important because unfortunately a lot of people, that's like their default way of thinking, right? Is this very much this utilitarian, whatever means necessary in order to get the end that we want. So it is addressing sort of a reality of the world.
It's a return to pagan politics, right?
Yeah.
I think that, see, I'm always going to try to hammer this home on this platform, is that this will to power, this Nietzschean will to power, is very much just going back to like the Roman legions, pre-Christian Rome, in all pagan societies, all pagan, empires, right? Like the Babylonian Empire, all of it was will to power stuff, Yeah. And it's Christianity. It's Christianity that presents like a new way of life, which is the opposite of will to power. And it's exactly what Nietzsche, thought was so rank about Christianity, was that it created like this kind of like
slave
weakness.
Mentality.
Yeah. Because you were no longer pursuing will to power or might makes right. You were pursuing this kind of like turn the other cheek and just try to like help each other or whatever. And that dichotomy is on full display in this Fallout TV show, for one, because one of the things about this show is the fish out of water element of Lucy McLean.
Lucy,
being introduced in the wasteland, introduced as a character who is utterly virtuous, more or less, right? Especially within the context of this TV show. In a product of civilization, let's call it, and being introduced into the kind of barbarism of the wasteland, the outside world.
Well, and remember the text I sent to you, even before I was like 5 minutes in, I was like, oh, so it's like the Wild West is kind
this,
of.
Oh yeah. It is. This is especially because it's taking place on the West Coast, because the only games I ever played were 3 and 4, and those are all East Coast, like New England games. Fallout 3 is Washington, D.C., and Fallout 4 is Boston. So it's a very different environment. But, my kids, they love New Vegas. That's their favorite Fallout one, which I think is like everyone's favorite Fallout, I guess. But that one obviously takes place in Nevada, right? But it's still got that. And the original games were California. There's Fallout 1 and 2. So there's basically 2 kinds of Fallout games. There's the desert style West Coast and the kind of like forested New England style. And so this TV show obviously went with the desert, probably for many reasons, but.
Well, and before you go any further, you mentioned the thing about how it's this whole like will to power is basically the pagan mindset, right? Because in one sense, obviously it was, you could say incarnated in Christianity, but obviously the seeds are put down in the Old Testament in Judaism. And so you maybe like the Judeo-Christian mindset is this brotherhood, right? And I use that word on purpose because we see it in various ways kind of turned on its head, right? When we have the brotherhood.
The Brotherhood of Steel.
It's in many ways they take it's obviously there. That is the power like pushed to the extreme, at least in this context of the wasteland. And yet they're using the language of medieval.
They
Christian
do, yeah.
knights,
honestly,
right? But they
it's
call
the only
themselves
part of the show that looks like it has any type of like religious context. Like there's a moment, where they seem to have like monks. Oh yeah, I take it back. I totally forgot about the actual cult that's in Vault 4. So there's another example of religion in Fallout, where they're doing like the sacrifices. Everyone just robes and smears themselves in blood. Fallout is very
well. It's got the kind of like pagan like sacrifice like blood orgy sort of thing going on too, which is what it was supposed to be.
It's interesting. See, that's the thing is like, I need to rewatch through this show because really it's kind of all over the map as far as just like throwing things at you, little nuggets to chew on.
Well, because it's an odyssey, right? I mean, she's traveling, they have this, like you said, the MacGuffin that she has to go and find, and then she has to go and transport. And it's like, and she's meeting different, strange characters along the way, or she's stopping at this island, just like Odysseus did. And, oh, look, everybody's, turned into pigs, or everybody's like, she has all those types of it. I mean, it's the odyssey, right? Well, I mean, all the stories, most of the stories just refer back to that.
So what I wanted to say is like, if you go back to the beginning of the show, what you're shown is a relatively utopian scenario of Vault 33, where Lucy comes from.
a walled garden.
Yes, it is.
It's a paradise.
But you know, and like it's like 1950s Americana. But everyone is like, you know, all smiles and eating their kind of Jello cake.
It's Pleasantville.
That's 100% right. Yeah, it's totally Pleasantville.
Yeah. It's post-apocalyptic Pleasantville. Post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
And so it's tough. I'm trying to like, you don't necessarily see a church in that situation, but the context is that there's going to be a wedding, that Lucy's going to be married to another Vault-E. And I'm pretty sure that there's like a pastor or is it just the overseer? See, that's what I'm trying to remember.
Is
there a cleric?
Yeah,
I
thought it was just like no, I don't remember any. I feel like I would have remembered that, but I guess I'm open to correction too.
All right. Well, and so I'm curious. Like, so the only time you ever see anything that looks like, you know, civilized, it seems to be a-religious, I guess, right? And yet later on in the show, when you finally meet another group, the Vault 4 dwellers, who turn out to be legitimately just like nice people that happen to have like, you know, ears growing out their forehead, like not the right kind of ears.
Well, yeah,
but like
we can maybe explain.
They're all
we can
like
explain
kind of
that, you know,
mutated.
when we get to that point.
But like
it's partially because of their origin, as it was, you know, scientists were experimenting. But anyway, keep going.
The point being though is that like the only other time you see a community of like kindness and civility and all that, they do seem to be a religious community. Right, they're like a really
they've
weird.
Got the scapegoat. They
got a really weird cult thing going on. But
another callback. Yeah. They've got the scapegoat in theirs, right? Yeah. They've got the release valve, and that's what their sacrificial, you know, worship ceremonies are.
What are they sacrificing? Because it's not a human. It's not like an evil. Like it all feels very evil, right? Like the whole setup of that particular episode is that like there's something wrong with these really nice people, you know, what's at the bottom of this, you know, kind of thing. And it turns out that, you know, Lucy mucks up their lives trying to like figure out what's wrong with them, only discover that there's nothing wrong with them, that it's her own cynicism, her newly found cynicism from the wasteland that's been brought back into the vault with her, kind of thing. She's been kind of contaminated by the sin of the wasteland. Which leads to a very funny moment where they're supposedly about to kill her, but instead they're all like, instead we're going to banish you from our community, excommunicate.
Yeah, basically bring her back to where back to square one.
But then it's like, I know it's going to be hard up there, so I want to give you 2 weeks supply of food. And yes, fine, we'll help carry it up for you. And, you know, like all this stuff. But then...
Well, I mean, and Chris Parnell is just... it's awesome. So funny in
He's
anything
super
he does,
funny.
too.
It's a very humorous show. A very gory show, so be careful of all that. But, like, very humorous.
I know. They lean into the humor. It's not like... I never really was rolling my eyes to it, but you knew that it was like, that's what they were going for.
But anyway, like, so... that's like the only kind of like real religion you see in this show is this kind of strange cult from Vault 4, but it does happen to produce like very kind people. They've taken in the refugees from, you know, Shady Sands after it's been blown up, you know, like they're like the only good people that aren't nefarious corporates experiments, you know, like Vault 33, 31 and 32 or whatever. I guess they weren't experiments, but like, you know, I don't know. They're kind of like this kind of secular utopia, I guess, which...
Well, yeah. So, I mean, and I guess just to kind of jump ahead, because like you said, spoiler alert at the beginning, but like the 8th episode, the last episode of the season is when it all kind of is like the veil is pulled back and you see what led to what we've sort of been experiencing for the past 7. And it's this Vault-Tec company, and they've basically been planning for the apocalypse, this nuclear war. They don't really say what caused the nuclear war, just that there are rising tensions. I mean, it's a Cold War.
It's all just Cold War.
Soviet Russia. So it's the Reds, which again, that will kind of play a part in one of our antagonists.
This is all alternate history. I mean, just to clarify, right? It's not even trying to. It's certainly rooted in history up until about like 1950. But then after that, it's
if the Soviets had dropped the nuclear bomb and started nuclear war, where it was all this, repercussions, both sides going back and forth, destroys the whole world. But then, what does it look like from the US
I don't know if you
side?
missed it or not, but it's revealed that Vault-Tec is the ones that dropped the bomb.
Oh yeah, no.
So there is no nuclear war.
They're the ones that bring it about so that they can.
Everything is Cold War stasis, where it's basically commies versus democracies. And the big twist in this is that basically it's the military industrial complex, just at an atomic level, and Vault-Tec is like, peace isn't profitable. We need war or whatever. And so they've been trying to stoke the fires of war. And then they reach a point where they're like, hey, the only way to continue forward with our financial success, our ascent to the top of the capitalist hierarchy, is to control the hierarchy as such by basically nuclear annihilating the planet and then starting over with the population of Vault-Tec consumers
in our image, right? In our image. And the idea is that you have these tripods, these tri-vaults, and you have one that is like the controlling one, and then one is like the test one, and then one is like the byproduct or whatever. And so you can, or the control, you could say, the control vault. And so the one of them is kind of in charge of the other two.
Well, and that's what I was trying to figure.
Depending on...
See, I never quite understood. All right, in the case of this show, there's Vault 31, and it's revealed that is basically just like a stasis chamber for all of these managers, Vault-Tec managers, to continually be kind of like brought in after the old managers get old and replace them. So, with Vault-Tec management, right? Like in perpetuity kind of thing. Yeah. So that's 31. 33 is the kind of like utopian 1950s, everything's cool, Pleasantville. And then 32 is what? Just is it just there to like share, so there was like a separate community, so like to prevent inbreeding, I guess? Is that like the basic idea?
Yeah.
I mean, you're still going to end up with inbreeding over time.
Yeah, they kind of make that joke in the first episode where it's like that cousin is in love with her, but she has to go marry somebody from the other one, and like the main Lucy has to go marry somebody from 32.
Well, and that's fine. Like I basically get that, but then also the show seems to imply that something really, really nefarious happened in 32, because the first time that any character from 33 manages to go there, it's a slaughterhouse and everyone's killed themselves basically, and it's just something has gone very, very wrong in Vault 32. And on the one hand, maybe that show, I brought this up with my kids, and my kids said, well, they just like, there's this line where, you put rats in a cage and they'll eat themselves kind of thing. And so Vault 32 was just like the humans went crazy. And like, they just accepted that. But I kind of feel like the show was more vague, even though that's totally plausible. Maybe it really is an example of like, some of these humans turned out great, like Vault 33, where like there really is this kind of like utopian equilibrium amongst the residents, and everyone's like super pleasant with each other. But then right next door in Vault 32, everyone is butchering each other.
And what snapped after 200 years?
Well, and I thought that there was going to be some kind of like experimentation going on in Vault 32 that led to catastrophe, and that somehow that was benefiting Vault 33. It's also where the
Raiders came in from. They came in from 32, and that's when they posed as the regular 32 people
in the show,
and were able to then infiltrate 33 and have this big like butcher party and stuff.
Well, and so I don't know. My kids seem to think that it's just like the dude snapped, Lord of the Flies style, and sometimes.
Which there's a lot of social contract stuff in here too. There's a lot of
I do think
social contract conversations in this show.
This has probably been a good segue into, I think, maybe the biggest theme of the show, which is, can we manage ourselves out of the human condition? Right? Because let's just take my kids' arguments at face value that you have two vaults that have the same resources, the same people in them, but Vault 33 creates an idyllic world out of it. Vault 32, utterly eats itself alive, pretty much literally, and it's like, what is this? Is this a commentary on how some people will snap and some people won't, right? Like, I mean, what am I supposed to take away from that scenario as a viewer, kind of thing? Because it's also contrasted with,
well, like, what's the efficient cause? Is it the nature or the nurture, right? Will the people just do it, or is it just the lab or the tank that you put them in?
Well, and the ironic thing, kind of within the context of that 31, 32, 33 trifecta of vaults, the reality is that they're getting the same leadership. They're all coming from 31's cryostasis tubes. They seem to have the same resources, right? And so I think it is something of a microcosm against the second layer of this, which is the wasteland topside versus the vaults that allow for civilization to occur. Whether it's Vault 4 or Vault 33, right? It's the same question. It's like, on the one hand, you have a scenario where you have two communities that have the same resources. One community turns out good, when the other community turns out bad. And then on the other hand, you have two communities, those who have resources down in the earth, and the rest of the world, who is up there just scrapping by, basically killing each other for supplies all the time. Classic apocalypse stuff. And I think the show's biggest question is like, how does civilization exist? Or can civilization, like war never changes. In other words, it's basically a synonym for saying humans never change, right? And
it's the same original sin thing, going back to our first point.
Well, as such, what you basically have within the context of this show are, a group of people that think that the best way to save civilization is to control it, to manage it. Like, there's another game my kids are playing right now that's really popular called it's about people. It's basically Starship Troopers. My kids, they'll never listen to this, but if they did, they'd kill me.
Basically, that's Halo. Isn't that just Halo? Isn't that what Halo was? Halo was Starship Troopers as a video game.
That is fair.
I remember when Halo came out.
Literally, because you've seen Starship Troopers, you've seen that movie, right? Like, have you? All right, so it's very, it's like it opens with like a.
And I also get the satire, the commentary of like, the imperialism and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like, anyway, basically, this video game has this idea of managed democracy. And so the idea is that America has turned into a fascist state, but it still calls itself democratic, but it's managed democracy, which I joke with my kids. It's like, we're already there. This is, if you think that we're living in a democracy, we are 100% a managed democracy right now.
That's actually, I thought this to myself when I was watching you listen to some of the Fallout characters where it's like, oh, we're going to come up and we're going to restart civilization. And I thought to myself, they're going to greet you guys as liberators. Do you remember that line from the Iraq War?
Yes.
I was like, you're going to come up from your Fallout shelter and they're all the ghouls and wastelanders are going to greet you as liberators.
No, it's totally, there's this really great line. I don't know if we've said it yet in the conversation here, but it's like, everyone wants to save the world. We just disagree on how to do it. And like, that's at the heart of all human conflict, is like, everyone thinks they're the good guy. Everyone thinks they've got the right idea for how to like save this planet. But and this is the problem. This is,
did you see what I wrote in? Because you put that in the outline. I was like, even I thought that was naive. Yeah. Even I was like, that's naively optimistic. And I'm always the one who will say that corny line. So
the problem is that all sides within the context of this show, and this isn't a critique of the show. I think the show is critiquing the human condition, right? All sides are trying to do the pagan will to power thing. Like, there's only one genuine kind of like legitimately Christian stand-in in this show, and it's Lucy. And Lucy is someone who is just practicing virtue ethics, right? Just like full stop. Every decision she makes throughout the entire show is basically selfless.
Now, consciously, consciously you could say that she maybe has like almost like a Kantian like code that she's following, like that's her obedience to it. But we can look at it objectively and be like, well, she's been, she's practicing virtue, basically.
Well, maybe it would be like, so for example, there's a moment where they're given the opportunity to steal a fusion core which powers the Vault 4 community in order to fuel a Brotherhood of Steel suit,
the mech suit,
and that would in theory make her duty to her father that much easier to accomplish, right? Her goal of saving, her code that she's trying to follow and stuff like that. Well, she could have sacrificed.
Titus even says to her, he does even say that to her. He's like, I can help you get your dad if I have this, I think too. So
and yet she still says no, not at the expense of this community kind of thing. And so, I mean, if it was a deontological type thing, maybe she would have been okay. The greater need is to save Vault for 33, save my father so that we can go back.
Well, that's utilitarianism, but the deontology is just stealing.
But it's like a code of ethics, though, right? Yeah, but like I feel like I guess all I'm arguing is that I think that she's a better representative of virtue ethics than she is deontology.
Yeah, she's as close as you're gonna get. So
eventually, those two things they kind of blur together.
Which anyway, I think and I do have a little bit. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not gonna argue with. I'm not gonna fight you on that.
We had a whole conversation about this back in
I'll just quietly. I don't know. Rebel in my mind. Moving on to.
I didn't say they're the same thing. I just said that they kind of eventually they get a little complicated. We have discussed this. What episode was that? Was that one of our Last of Us?
The smoke from your incense is starting to get obscured. Is starting to obscure the view. But which I think this is fitting, right? That, like you said, she is the light of the show, right? And her name is Lucy. I also thought it was clever. The last name is McLean, Maclean. So you've got that clean part at the end of it too, right? The clean light,
yes.
Which obviously. Is going to show up in various, because she's got her family members too. I think it's funny that her brother, do you remember her brother's name? Is Norm. Yeah. So it's like you've got the, normie kind of care, which he obviously is, but he does sort of represent the kind of everyman coward who is supposed to kind of make up that's supposed to be the character of the Fallout people, right? And how many times do the shelter people get described as, well, you guys are cowards.
You all hid in your
And he even calls himself
in your basements while we were out here dealing with the hard work of, the lady says this to Lucy at the beginning of the show, while we were up here eating each other, you guys were having cushy lives down in your basements hiding. And obviously the big guy has that line in his mouth, like, we're all cowards. That's why we live in a vault. Like halfway through the show.
Chet, right?
Yeah, Chet. There you go. That's what we wrote.
But again, what's funny about his name? So Chet is like a diminutive of the name Chester, which means fortress.
See, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, isn't that
That's
funny?
pretty good.
See, that was a fun little. I was doing my research, so
this is why we keep you on the show.
This is Mike's. This is my for the etymology, because everybody loves etymology, right? I haven't quite because they talk about Lucy's mom a lot, and she becomes more and more important especially by the end of the season. There's sort of a big reveal, which I don't know. She's a ghoul, I guess, but she's like totally zombified by the end. Lucy kind of euthanizes her, basically, you could say, as well. But her name is Rose, and I haven't quite been able to put my finger on what the significance of that, but I feel like it's too, with all the other examples, it's like it can't just be a coincidence, right?
Well, I never really said that I actually bought into your assumption that any of these names actually mean anything, Mike. Though you did.
Oh, I never asked. I just assumed. I just jumped right in, Jacob. This was a monologue.
You did manage to, pull out a few things that I could politely nod my head to. Should we try to pretend that Rose means something?
Jacob, no, listen. So No, we don't have to, because like the Chet one I thought was really funny. But, we already mentioned how there's this brotherhood, but obviously the brotherhood or the brotherly love is very much contrasted with what we would consider to be a Christian sense. But do you remember their big like conflict? What city or settlement do they go and destroy in the season?
Philly?
What's it called?
Oh, Philly?
Philly. Yeah, which again, that's clearly a diminutive of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So you have these like two brotherhoods, and obviously, again, what does it come down to? It really just comes down to power in both of those.
Here's what
and I know that this is taking place on the West Coast, but like it's not a coincidence. Like it's too much of a coincidence.
Well, listen, I think that's
right? I mean, of all
that, I would argue that sounds more compelling that the writers actually did that intentionally than I think that like Lucy McLean actually means light, like clean light kind of thing. I mean, like, hey, I wasn't going to say this, Mike. I wasn't going to tear down your assumptions here.
You were going to politely nod. And yeah.
Like, yeah, sure, Mike, you got that.
What? I'm not looking for your validation, Jacob.
What? This is, but like, I don't know if Rose means anything other than, by any other name. It smells so sweet. Only in this case, she's a ghoul, so I guess it's not true.
Now he wants to be a Shakespeare guy, huh? Now he wants to be a Shakespeare guy.
But, the Brotherhood of Steel, those people are not... Here's the thing. I do think the show makes them feel more villainous than they actually are in the games. Like, in the games, they really are just kind of like post-apocalyptic knights. And it really is like a chivalric order, right?
Yeah.
And I did do a little bit of like newbie YouTubing to just like, explore a little bit more of like the Fallout universe prior to this episode. And it turns out that they are the remnants of the U.S. Army. So basically, after the whole world falls apart, what's left of the military, the U.S. military, combines to try to really kind of commandeer all of like the potential weapons that are just like hanging out there ready for use, and try to bring back a sense of safety and order to society.
Yeah.
So they're not really painted villainously in the games, and even in the TV show, I don't necessarily think they're villainous. I think they're kind of like anything kind of amoral.
Yeah.
Like they seem to just be.
And it speaks to the idea that like, especially what's always emphasized when it comes to like military stuff or knight stuff is obedience to a sort of hierarchy. And if you're going to have a cynical, like, quote unquote Hollywood writer who has this mentality towards obedience in general or hierarchy in general, of course it's going to come off as more negative than positive. Right. And so
I do think that there's just a, frankly, they look villain. This is my 2 cents. And I am not saying, I actually believe that these Hollywood writers probably just super love it. Like, and there's so much fan love and fan service in the show that I guarantee you they know way more about Fallout than I do. And that they're all true fans. And they probably spent thousands of hours playing these video games. So who am I to critique these Hollywood writers? But what I will say is, I do think that within like the Hollywood machine, it's way too easy for them to turn the gun-toting militia into a vaguely nefarious organization.
Oh, this is your like Fargo. This is our Fargo episode all over again.
I'm just saying. I think if anything, it's just too easy for those writers to fall into the rhythm of saying these guys are military nuts, so they can't be that. Yeah. So they're warmongers, right? And warmongers can't be kind of like a pure society. And hey, I'm not saying that the Brotherhood of Steel is like a pure society in the games either, but there's a world in which like it's more readily apparent that this is far more like the Knights Templar, which is what they are modeled on, right? Than it is like some kind of kooky.
He is a virtuous, hero. I mean, he's a very sort of like almost like I guess naive or
like Maximus, the kid who takes the Titus moniker. Maximus.
Oh, I can't remember which is which. I know that his
real name is Maximus, and he's over Titus's power armor
as like the yeah.
After he lets him die. I mean,
he's a squire, and then he becomes the knight, kind of. So it's like a, I don't know, Prince and the Pauper situation too. But but he's like he is. I mean, and it's a naive virtue, right? Because he's like trying to figure it out, which I guess is sort of endearing. I mean, like,
well, he's just kind of like a naive wastelander. Is my like a lost orphan who falls in with. He has that Pacific Rim moment, which, oh, wait a second, Mike, you probably haven't gotten around to watching Pacific Rim, have you?
Oh,
wow.
No, not
I
yet.
try to raise you right, Mike. I try to instill the right values into you.
I'm very rebellious.
Here we are, man.
I probably would have if you had not encouraged me to. Then I would have.
No, right?
But you know what? Now I'm not gonna.
No, they basically that moment where Maximus climbs out of the refrigerator, which I'll throw another one in there. Indiana Jones and I don't know, the fourth one, the bat. I don't pay attention to the last. Yeah, good. Don't. But
Crystal
anyway,
Skull.
being of that one, Crystal Skull. There you go. He saves himself by hiding in a lead-lined refrigerator from an atomic blast. That's when Indiana Jones jumped the shark. Everyone. That's when Indiana Jones fridged. I'm pretty sure that turned into like a new generation's jumping the shark. Was when you fridge something.
There's some scenes in the third one where you're kind of like,
don't knock my childhood.
Yeah,
I can make fun of other people's childhood. You can't make fun of mine.
Sure.
But no, anyway, he climbs out of the refrigerator and there's the power suited Brotherhood of Steel guy. And there's this kind of like moment of inspiration, right? Where Maximus is like, finds a following, finds an ideal that he can serve kind of thing.
I was actually thinking that they were going to cut back to that scene, and the really old guy who's like in charge of the Brotherhood. I thought it was going to be him, like reveal himself to be like the helmet was going to come up. I was expecting that actually, but they never went for that. I don't know. Well, he's got to be like a main villain next season, probably, or something.
I think he will. Yeah, I think they set that up for that. Again, I think that they've made the Brotherhood of Steel much more ambiguous. Well, they're always kind of like amoral. Like they're kind of like just like a police force. And so like you can have good cops and you have bad cops, right? Like that's who the Brotherhood of Steel, like the closest thing to the Wastelands police.
Not in modern media. You cannot in modern media.
Yeah. Oh, how you mean? Yeah. True. Yeah. There's only one type of cop now. But so you view them like that, and oftentimes they're great. Oftentimes they're like the only source of civilization in any given circumstance, right? But this particular TV show has definitely given them more of a nefarious vibe, I would say. But from the eyes of Maximus, however, I do think that he is the human element that allows you to think of like the Brotherhood of Steel as a place of order, a place of hierarchy, somewhere that things make more sense than they do out in the wasteland where everyone's just, constantly eating each other,
And you're probably going to tell me it's a coincidence, Jacob, that they have names like Maximus and Titus, which are very Roman legionnaire sounding names.
They are, yeah. No,
although the one squire has the name Thaddeus, which is technically Aramaic, so I don't know how that fits, but
well, he must have been the Eastern Roman Empire, Mike. The real one. But
you're just dropping nuclear bombs all over the place, aren't you?
I'm in the mood. But yeah, let's see. The only other faction that we haven't really covered, because we talked about like Vault-Tec, and there's the Brotherhood of Steel, and then there's the New California Republic. Which here's one thing that I did appreciate is their flag has a
two-headed bear. Yeah.
Two-headed bear, which reminds me of like the two-headed eagle of like Roman or Russian standards, like the two-headed eagle. They have a two-headed bear. That's what I'm gonna say they're doing there.
That's where myth and, in their case, history starts to coincide, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm assuming that those two heads represent both church and state for the new Republic of the New California Republic.
100. Well, for sure. Yeah,
that's what that's for.
Can't convince me otherwise.
One of the we probably, this conversation point kind of got dropped halfway through this episode, but like at the end of the day, you have Vault-Tec, who are clearly the bad guys in this TV show, right? The nefarious capitalist overlords or whatever. And opposed to them is why can't I think of her name now? Moldavar? Moldaver. Yeah, Moldaver. Yeah. Who is basically an altruistic communist, I guess, right?
Because, I mean, she oversaw the raid and murder of, which maybe she saw it as like an act of war, but when they kill all those people, like they're non-combatants.
Oh yeah, they're killing non-combatants for sure. And honestly, she is now taking up leadership capacity in this new Republic of California.
Which, California just Republic. As a quick aside, is there a movie that takes place in California that can't use the observatory? Because I feel like it's every movie that is set in California has to use the observatory, which maybe it was a callback to Rebel Without a Cause and, La La Land and all that. But it's like,
well, it's only because it's kind of like how you point out that Hollywood can't help but like referencing itself and like loving itself and things like that. That observatory, just because it's been in so many movies, now it has to be in all the movies. It's like going to New York City and not showing the Statue of Liberty, or not showing the Hollywood sign.
What are those called? It's called like a contextual shot, or it's like a shot that tells you, like you have to see, that, like you said, the Statue of Liberty in the background to know, oh, I guess we're in New York now. I was talking to some students about this because I was like, how like in every military movie you watch, they have to show them on the base and there has to be a bunch of runners with the drill sergeant, like I don't know, but
doing cadence,
it's like you can't be in a military movie.
It's not a military base unless there's a platoon running cadence around 100%.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, sorry, the observatory. I just had to get that out of the way because I was like, figures, right? It's been 8 episodes or 7 episodes and we haven't seen the observatory, but aren't we supposed to be in California?
They're just saving it for the end. Yeah. But anyway, it basically always comes down to management in this future, right? Like, and so like, that's like the villainous line given into the mouth of like the villains of the show, Vault-Tec, who is it? Brad's guy or guys?
It's like, that's like Agent Smith, right? They're like the mundane villains sort of, like
the future is management is a big line.
Oh, I know. It's like, which to us millennials, this is like striking right to the heart of our existential angst, isn't it?
This is 100%. Yeah. Hey, preach to the choir here. Like, I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
I know the iconic line from the game is that war never changes, but when he said the weapon of mass destruction is time, I was like, you feel that in your soul. You felt that in your bones for all of us, like I said, aged millennials.
That's so funny. Well,
we can't get over the fact that we're getting old. So
at the end of the day, both sides are just managers trying to manage resources. You know what I mean? And so like, even if you're some kind of altruistic commie like Moldaver, you still you live long enough to see yourself become the villain because there's just no option on the table for just living a virtuous Christian existence. Right. Which I get it. That leads to your death. I know it does. It's what got Jesus killed. And it's what got all the early martyrs killed, is refusing to not take up power and use it against, in Jesus's case, against the Romans who wanted to kill him, decided to kill him, or the early Christians who...
And that was where the true power of God was working, right? That was where grace, and that's the ironic thing, of course.
That is, like the monasteries of Europe, which saved civilization, they didn't do it by going out there and raiding the Vikings.
It wasn't by the sword.
I mean? It wasn't. It was just through the simple, which is why I do think that Vault 33 is a good example, and to some extent Vault 4 is a good example of communities who aren't out there trying to take over the world so they can manage it, but they're down there just being good neighbors. You know what I mean? They're just being basically these kind of like monastic cave dwellers, and obviously it's an imperfect comparison, but it's also, if this is a show about like, what's it going to take to save civilization? I think the only answer you see in it is the kindness of Vault 33 and Vault 4, right? Even if there are nefarious underpinnings, arguably more nefarious in Vault 33, ironically, because Vault 4, they may have weird blood sacrifices, but like, it doesn't seem to be human. It seems to be just more of like an ancient.
And here's maybe another irony too, is that like, they're the ones who are like the most deformed, right? Because they had these scientists experimenting on them. You know, we talked about Chris Parnell's overseer character, who's a Cyclops. And yet they're the ones who are most, you know, human in the sense of they have the worship ceremony, which again, even if it looks weird and pagan to us, that is the norm for most of human history. And this goes back to, again, our scapegoat episode, and how this will just naturally happen in human societies. It may look differently, right? It may look a little bit more clean or a little bit more sanitized in our modern kind of whatever you want to say, postmodern society or whatever, but it's the same thing happening, right? And so in a sense, they're the most human, even though on the surface, they're the ones who look the least human.
This actually does remind me of the C.S. Lewis, his last book that everyone loves, Till We Have Faces. Because in that book, there's a dichotomy between the fox, who is a Greek philosopher. And so in that regard, he's kind of like what's good about Vault 33, which is this kind of weird secular utopian society. But hey, it has produced like a sense of, off the coattails of Christianity, I will throw that out there. But that being said, once you have the Christian morals, you can adopt them and use them well, right?
To yes and your point, I mean, the 1950s, people look back on and say they were still riding on the fumes of Christendom, right? Of Christian society.
Yeah.
So like,
well, that's why they fell apart so easily in the 60s. It's because it was a house of cards. It was just like the morals were there, it was just but like there wasn't enough body to resist all the craziness that happened the next decade. But like you know, so Till We Have Faces, you have Greek philosophy and it's great, but then you also have I forget the priest's name, but like the old religion with the blood and the ghastliness and things like that. And one of the commentaries of that book is that there's something true about both these things, and that it's so easy. One of the things that C.S. Lewis was trying to do, I think, was point out that like, the fox with all of his Greek philosophy, all of his Enlightenment thinking, certainly feels more enlightened, feels like he has everything figured out. But there's something that persists in the mystery of the cultic religion that is as true to humanity and as essential for humanity as the enlightenment of the fox, you know? And so those two vaults, Vault 33 and Vault 4, they're kind of the same dichotomy. You know, there's the Enlightenment vault and there's the cultic vault, but they both manage to achieve civilization. And I think that as Christians, we're supposed to be the balance between those two vaults, because we have the Eucharist, we don't have the blood.
The head and the heart, right? It's the head and the heart. And, going back to what you're saying about like, whether it's the ancient term philosopher, which was sort of used for scientists, and even the scientists that are used and that were doing the experimenting in Vault 4, it's like, it wasn't until they were sort of overthrown that Vault 4 was able to kind of strike some sort of balance. But because even the intellect is a power of the soul. And so even if you just reduce it to the intellect, it still is looking at the world or reality through the lens of power. And so it's still going to ultimately be problematic, right?
Yeah, without that balance.
It's going back, it's still the lens of power, which is ultimately the main problem. That's the deeper problem, that going back to that episode 8 big kind of boardroom meeting, is that it was just various facets of power, and they were still trying to control, right? Like you said, it's management. The future is management.
The future is management. I think that'll be the big line that comes out of that show. It's just so fitting. You just look around the world, and it's like the future is management. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Actually, it's almost like if the movie Office Space met with a movie, like
some
whatever,
Terminator or something,
Dead, like The Walking Dead.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, we can't end this show without like talking about Walter Goggins' Ghoul character, who I suppose at the end of the day, there's not much that it contributed to this particular conversation, but he was obviously one of the best things about that show. Super fun character to watch.
He's like the highlight. He's the one that sticks with everybody. Yeah, he's the just
Walter Goggins is the man
in any role he takes.
The best.
In any role he does. Yeah,
great job on that show. And we won't be able to talk about it today, but someone who's lost their faith, in humanity, and is now only out for vengeance.
Well, and that's what's going to make, because I mean, think of what happened at the end of the season, where he and Lucy now become this duo, and they're going to foil each other super well. And
yes,
and it's going to be, but now he's on his own quest. He's on his own odyssey to find his family, and so she's going to kind of be, like we said, that foil. She's going to
humanize him. Like she's there. He's a ghoul.
She's gone through this.
He's the living dead, and her life is going to transform him back into a human being again. Maybe not physically, but his soul.
Along with, I'm assuming it's gonna be about him finding his daughter too, right? And that's gonna be the big sort of like turning point in season 2. And what is Lucy going to teach him? She's going to, like you said, it's going back to this like humans cooperating with each other, helping each other. It's that
just doing the right thing,
Jacob. That faith. And guess what the image for faith is in the Christian tradition? It is light.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Lucy. Wow, look at that. Wow. Look at how it all came together.
Mike. I guess you're right. I guess that's exactly what the writers were trying to do. Man.
Yep, it's 100%. Who's the naively optimistic?
Oh,
wait, it is still me, isn't it?
I was a fool.
Yeah, you're the cynic. You're the Walter Goggins to my Lucy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. How does it feel? How does it feel?
Man.
I'm clicking the stop button so you can't add anything else.
Thanks for listening to Voyage Podcast. The Voyage Podcast is a production of Voyage Comics and Publishing, which seeks to create exceptional entertainment informed by Catholic values that inspire people to live a heroic life. Voyage Comics seeks to advance truth and beauty found in powerful stories. To learn more, visit voyagecomics.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.